Alright, I'll be completely upfront with you because you're probably already thinking it. I'm making this video because the Barbie movie came out this summer. Some people loved it, some people hated it, but either way, people were talking. The iron is not necessarily still hot, but it's not entirely cold. As someone who has never been in the target audience for anything Barbie related, this is really the best and possibly only time I can talk about 2008's Barbie and A Christmas Carol. Now there are dozens and dozens of direct-to-video Barbie movies. Quite a few of them had a framing device where Barbie would narrate the story to a friend or family member, usually Kelly, who was dealing with an issue. The story would always tie into whatever problem they were having, and by the end the moral would be clear. This time, Kelly's annoyed that instead of staying home and doing their usual Christmas Eve traditions, she and her family are going to a charity ball. Barbie tells her a variation on the Christmas Carol story to instill the virtues of charity and the Christmas spirit. At least that's ostensibly what the story's about. The charity part doesn't really come into play until about halfway through, but we'll get to that in a bit. In every movie, at least as much as I'm aware, Barbie plays the main character in the story. They may have a different name, but their voice and design are unmistakably Barbie. This might be one of the only movies to sort of break that tradition. Although Eden looks like Barbie, she doesn't sound like Barbie. Barbie is voiced by Kelly Sheridan, who played the character from 2001 to 2015. That's a lot of Barbie, and she also always voiced whatever fairy tale character Barbie played in one of these movies. This time, her character, Eden Starling, is not voiced by Sheridan, but instead by Morwenna Banks. Allegedly, it's still Barbie playing the part. In an official interview, Barbie, voiced by Sheridan, says that she's the one playing Eden.
In the movie, I play Eden Starling, a glamorous singer in a Victorian London theatre who doesn't understand the meaning of Christmas.
Why the exception for this one story? Well, most of the time, the protagonist of these movies is a kind-hearted character and role model for the kids in the audience. She embodies everything Barbie does. Eden, being a stand-in for Scrooge, does not. At least not until the end. Even Kelly points out that this is not the character Barbie typically tells her stories about. I wonder if Mattel was a little iffy about showing Barbie in a negative light, even if she's only acting. If test audiences didn't react well, they could have always called it Barbie Presents A Christmas Carol, rather than Barbie in A Christmas Carol. Or maybe they wanted an actress with an authentic British accent. We may never know. Eden Starling is not a crotchety old moneylender, but instead a prima donna singer who runs her own theater company. Her attitude toward her other employees is definitely in line with Scrooge. They are overworked, unappreciated, presumably underpaid, and unable to go home and spend Christmas with their families. The only crew member that Eden has any fondness for is her childhood friend Catherine, who now does the costuming. Even then, Eden acts very entitled and clingy around her, seemingly having forgotten how to be a good friend. A lot of the blame falls on Eden's dearly departed aunt, who raised her in full stage mom mode. Aunt Marie taught Eden to be cold and selfish, saying it was the only way to actually succeed in life. She, of course, plays the Jacob Marley role, appearing as a ghost that night and warning her niece to change her ways before it's too late. The traditional three spirits follow, and the story generally plays out how you would expect. Scrooge, Marley, and Cratchit aren't the only characters who have been gender swapped. Christmas Present is usually a Father Christmas type, while the other two are deliberately androgynous. This time, they're all played by women of differing ages. Past looks like a teenager, Present is approaching middle age, and Future is in her twilight years, but very elegant. Out of the three of them, I think Past worked the least for me. She's portrayed as a big fan of Eden's work, which makes her come off as a little too nice. Not that I need my spirits to be mean, but they're here to teach the character a lesson, not gush over what great singers they are. I guess it goes with the teenage angle. She's very excitable and a little much for me. Then again, as I said before, I'm not the target audience here, so maybe she'd be more appealing if I were a little girl. Personal tastes aside, I think the only part where Christmas Past objectively did not work comes near the end of her section. As they watch young Eden relive one of her few happy Christmases, present-day Eden remembers something bad is about to happen. She tries to get the spirit to leave, but the scatterbrained ghost wants to stay and enjoy the party. In barges Aunt Marie, ruining the atmosphere and utterly traumatizing Eden. Back in Eden's room, the spirit says she's sorry for not listening to Eden's request to leave. The thing is, the spirit is supposed to bring back core memories, both good and bad. Seeing her genuinely apologize for doing that makes it seem like she's new at her job. The past is written in stone, and it's very odd to me that she doesn't know what she's supposed to be showing her client. Christmas Present shows us that Catherine, who has previously stood up for her friend, has gradually gotten more fed up with Eden as time has gone by. Meanwhile, Catherine has been helping a struggling orphanage. This is where the charity message finally shows up. I was a little surprised, which is kind of silly in retrospect since I was watching A Christmas Carol. Let me explain. Although the theme of charity was briefly set up in the Barbie and Kelly introduction, I didn't see it get mentioned in the first half of the actual story. I assumed that the lesson Eden was meant to learn was to treat her employees and friends better. There is not a moment where she essentially says, "Screw the poor," like Scrooge does to the charity collectors. Catherine is sort of filling the Bob Cratchit role, but her family seems pretty well off in the Christmas Past flashback. As it turns out, Eden also needs to learn to give generously to the outside world, the same as Scrooge experienced. It just seemed a little jarring in the way it was dropped in with very little setup in Eden's narrative. I'll give them this. Once they commit to the orphanage plot, they really do stick with it, and it ties directly into Christmas Future. I was a little iffy on this part at first. This version of Christmas Future actually speaks, which takes away the ominous, nebulous nature of the character. But then again, this is a Barbie movie, which are not really associated with phrases like ominous or nebulous. The dark future does not involve Eden dying, at least not at the point we're shown. It is revealed that Eden will go on to fire her employees and quickly regret it. Now she's living in poverty. Meanwhile, Catherine is unable to help the orphanage due to being fired, and it shuts down as a result. We pick up on the starving, freezing Eden. When she reunites with Catherine, she finds that her former friend has gotten just as cold and uncaring as her. Catherine's explanation for what she's been through is probably the best delivered part of the movie. Her voice actress, Candice McClure, really sells how bitter she's become. They don't totally sugarcoat this, which I respect. Even though we have a Christmas future Eden can converse with, we still have the strong implication that all the orphans we saw a few moments ago are freezing on the streets or possibly dead. Eden might be in their position very soon if she doesn't change. Being a Christmas Carol, change she does. One of her first acts is to give her employees Christmas presents, but given that she had the epiphany the night before, those presents are just random things she had around her room. It's a pretty charming little moment. Many of the Barbie movies featured an animal sidekick or two for comic relief. Eden has Chuzzlewit, a greedy cat named after the Dickens book Martin Chuzzlewit. It's a slightly deeper literary cut than we normally see. I like that they chose that name instead of calling him Copperfield or something. Chuzzlewit is definitely a cat. He stays with Eden mostly because he's hungry and relies on her for food. He gets dragged through the past and future sequences against his will, but follows Christmas Present purely for the candy canes attached to her dress. In the potential dark future, he almost abandons his now impoverished owner for a cushier life. Even once Eden reforms, it looks like Chuzzlewit hasn't really learned anything. I'm not big on his design. It could be the mid-2000s CGI, but I really don't like his face. The other characters look a little better. It's not top-tier animation, but this is a direct-to-DVD movie from 2008. The plasticky appearance of everyone works pretty well for these Barbie movies, since they're all based on toys. There are definitely Barbieisms throughout this. I mentioned at the beginning that they seem a little wary about whether or not Barbie is playing Eden, or Eden is a totally separate character. Everything about Barbie always needs to be glamorous, because Barbie represents a certain level of idealism, even when she's relatable. That's not a critique, it's just stating a fact. When we see future impoverished Eden, she looks exactly the same. Neither she or Catherine have aged a day, and the only thing that signifies Eden being poor is that her opera gloves are now fingerless. Her hair and makeup budget does not seem to have been affected. Even their methods of charity are glamorous. Catherine makes costumes and puts on a show to raise money for the orphanage. Barbie's family, meanwhile, are going to a charity ball for a hospital. We're told they've raised a lot of money, but this is still a much fancier way of giving to the needy than, say, volunteering in a soup kitchen. That's not to say that there aren't lots of valid ways to help others, but I definitely noticed that this is the fanciest way of doing it. I don't want to end this video on a sour note, though. The ultimate message of getting out there and giving is still front and center. Even if this was never meant for me, its heart is definitely in the right place. The movie was pretty much what I expected it to be. I personally think there are better child-friendly versions of the story, but this one does an alright job. It follows along the same lines of the other couple Barbie movies I've seen over the years. They have their own dedicated followers, and if you're a fan of those, you'll probably like this one.